Welcome to Life Beyond Abortion, the podcast where we delve into the untold stories and experiences surrounding abortion. Stories often missing from everyday conversations, media reports, and even other podcast interviews. I'm your host, Melissa Ohden, the founder and CEO of the Abortion Survivors Network. As the author of You Carried Me, A Daughter's Memoir, and Abortion Survivors Break Their Silence, I've had the privilege of hearing the most powerful stories from some of the most resilient and courageous individuals. These stories and these people have profoundly transformed my life, and I believe they have the power to transform yours as well. Together, we will amplify these voices, share the truths that they illuminate, and challenge our culture to recognize what life is truly like beyond abortion. Welcome to this episode of Life Beyond Abortion. You know, in all the discussion about abortion in our culture today, I think one of the most common comments or questions we get from people is, what about in the case of health of the mother, concerns about the health of the baby? And I think we need to hear the experiences of women and children who have lived this firsthand. So today, that's really what we're going to delve into in this episode of Life Beyond Abortion. I have the great opportunity to introduce you to a friend and colleague in the pro-life movement, Suzanne Guy. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for having me. Thank you for your incredible show. It is such a privilege to be with you.
Well, and we're sort of twins. I mean, let's just be honest. People are probably already thinking this if they're looking on video. You and I are kind of mirror images of each other with dark brown hair and bangs. And, I like to think showing the love of Christ wherever we go. That is one of those things that I love most about you.
Oh, friend, I love that about you. You exude Jesus. And personally, I would love it if people thought we physically looked alike. You look about 40 years younger, but thank the Lord that we both love Jesus.
Exactly. I mean, that really is, that is the best beauty advice I would have for younger women, right? Is that's how we stay young, is exude the love of Christ. But, that's a whole other podcast episode we could do. I think that would be a great one, actually. But, for the purposes of this podcast, I would love for people to know a little bit about you and your family's story. You are someone who, for lack of a better term, you're sort of a lay person like me. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
had a clinical background, but we got involved in the pro-life movement because of deeply personal experiences with abortion and, coercion and all of those things. So let's kind of unpack it. What is your family's story and experience that then led you to getting involved in the pro-life movement?
Yes, thank you so much, Melissa. And it's such an important journey to share. And I know so many people out there can identify with this, unfortunately. Initially, when we went on this journey, we really thought that we just had a very rare, unusual experience. But as time would go on, we would find out that actually this is quite tragically common. And that is that three doctors insisted that my husband and I abort our daughter. We had struggled with infertility. That's a whole nother show as well. And when we got into the hands of doctors that were referred to us, we never thought to ask, are they pro-life? That is something that I will scream kindly from the rooftops for the rest of my life. Make sure your doctors are pro-life. Make sure you understand their worldview, the point of view that they're coming from. But when half my amniotic fluid was gone at 22 weeks, one of the doctors said, you must abort, you must abort. There must be a chromosomal abnormality not compatible with life with your child. Your child will die and you could die too. And then 2 weeks later, at 24 weeks, all the amniotic fluid was gone. And then we had all three of the doctors separate from one another, insisting that the only option was abortion. And that's when it really hit home to me in a more powerful way that if doctors are telling parents the solution to their child's health issue, instead of fighting for that child, instead of valuing that child, all of a sudden they see the child as disposable and they're saying to end the life of that child, we live in a culture of death that's bigger than what I realized when doctors are telling parents that's the solution to their child's health problem. And that's what really started to jettison me to take action in the pro-life world, which I'm ashamed to say I called myself pro-life. And I certainly made a pro-life decision, but I didn't know there were ways to get involved and was not actively getting involved.
Well, and I would say give yourself grace in that, right? All of us, in some way, shape, or form, I think, have something happen to us that make things much more clear, right? And
Mm,
um, most of us that are in leadership roles within the pro-life movement tend to have had that kind of, clarifying moment where we go, wow, I mean, I identified as pro-life, and I I knew that what a pregnancy center was, or all those things, but then, right, the rubber hits the road and we kind of go, whoa, whole new ball game. Can I ask, because I know
yes.
your story really well, how old were you at the time when you were facing that diagnosis, Suzanne?
31.
And I want to bring out these points because as a medical mama myself, right, I was 37 when I gave birth to Ava, so I was elderly, whatever, geriatric in the terms of the OBGYN world.
That's what they say.
Right, so I was
Not true.
geriatric, and right, she had some funky stuff on her ultrasound at 20 weeks, and already before that, though, they had been having the words abortion on all sorts of paperwork, and I remember having to call them up and saying, if you bring this up one more time, I will find another practice because this is not okay. And I think about this a lot. If we as women who, yes, I mean, in some ways, right, are sort of protected, but are, right, supported women, right, have education, family, right, faith background,
Right, right,
support, when we are staring down the coercion and sometimes force of medical professionals who instill fear, and yes, some of
right,
that I
right,
understand the fear, but there is a lot of fear mongering that can happen either, inadvertently or purposely.
right.
So if that happens to us at 31 and 37, what happens to other women who maybe don't have the knowledge, the support, the background, all of those things? I mean, what does that look like for other women like you, do you think, Suzanne?
That is such a fantastic and important question because so many women, because they don't have support or they're younger, or even if it's none of those things, even in our situations, we usually, not usually, we go to doctors and we entrust our care of ourselves and our children in the womb to those doctors, assuming that they are motivated by the best interest of both mother and child, assuming that they see both mother and child both equally valuable and that they will treat both and give both excellent health care. And so I think so often when people find themselves in this situation, especially if they don't have a support system, especially if they don't have any kind of faith in God, because I'm going to tell you, faith in God, Jesus Christ, was the reason that my husband and I could so boldly and unapologetically stand up so strong against the pressure. I shudder to think if it had been many, many years ago when I had not received Jesus as my Lord and Savior. So there are many components that you still, when you're sitting across from a medical professional, that you're thinking, this person went to school, I trust them, they have done their homework, they care about my child and me. And when you're sitting across from somebody that you have trusted and trust and is telling you the most outrageous things, and that the solution to your child's health problem is a death sentence, it is a moment that really takes you back. So, for women who don't have a support system, for women who may or may not have faith in God, even women who do have faith in God, you're sitting across from somebody that you've entrusted the care of your child and yourself to, and you're assuming they're going to tell you things that are in the best interest of both. So I think it is very scary for most. It is very shocking for most. It's a shocking moment to hear there might be anything wrong with your child at all, much less to have a medical profession suggest the solution is a death sentence. And I think more than ever, churches need to be talking about this from the pulpit, and the community needs to be talking about this because it's happening a lot. And women and men need to be prepared when they are pregnant to be seeking out a doctor that has some kind of faith that values both children, but also that they hear, heaven forbid, they're sitting across from a doctor that suggests a death sentence as a solution, which abortion is never medically necessary, that even though you're never prepared for that moment, they can be hearing that voice that abortion is never medically necessary. There is hope. I can tell this doctor no. I can get out of this practice and go find a different doctor. So I think all these conversations need to be talked about, even in our schools, although I know many schools come from a very pro-abortion standpoint, talking about the child in the womb is so valuable, the mother of equal value. If and when you're ever pregnant, if you ever get bad news, make sure that you know you can say no, that you do not have to listen to the voice of the lies. You can be scared for your child. You can be concerned for your child. You should be concerned. But you don't have to listen to people just because they have a fancier degree than what you have, just because they have a medical degree. They have biases too. And you can tell them no and run for the hills.
And so, what did that look like for you? Here you are staring down two different times of low amniotic fluid, then no amniotic fluid. What happened next, Suzanne?
Well, we had a series of different conversations. The first one was when there was half the amniotic fluid, and the doctor told me when I was on the ultrasound table that, I needed to abort. And I was by myself because my husband was on a business trip. And I said no as many different ways as I could. I will tell you, Melissa, in that moment, I thank God that one of the fruits to come out of the years of infertility is, as I wrestled with God, sometimes I was mad with him, sometimes I was sad, sometimes I was numb. But in that journey, he drew me so close to him, and I so hungered for more of him because I was so confused why Pete and I were struggling, that I got so close to him that his voice started to become the loudest in my heart and mind. He became my sufficiency and my satisfaction. And I went on this whole new journey with God. And so in that moment when this doctor is saying crazy, horrible things, God's voice was the loudest in my head. And so it almost was effortless to say no, 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 no. And then when she said, come back in 2 weeks, and all the amniotic fluid was gone, and Pete was with me, and she said the same things, but even more emphatically, and Pete said the same thing: we will not abort. What will you do for us? We will not abort. Then she sent us to speak with another doctor in the practice. And this conversation was even more chilling because of his demeanor was so casual about it all. But again, God's voice was the loudest in my head. And I'm not talking about an audible voice, but just that that peace that he gives and the words that he brings to your heart and mind when someone is saying lies to you, especially about your child, and devaluing your child and saying crazy things like, you'll have more children, as if this life didn't matter, to which God gave me the words, we don't care if we have 100 other children. This life matters. We want this life fought for. And so really, it, all glory to God, because I know how I think and who I am apart from him. And it was years of developing such an intimacy with him, still a very imperfect person, but slowly over time, more of his voice was in my heart and mind as I made decisions and thought about things, and same for Pete, and less of Suzanne's voice and thoughts and emotions, and more of, oh my gosh, I can see clearly in this that these people have lost their minds. And I was even rapid fire talking to God. Why do I have to convince doctors that my child is valuable? And Melissa, honestly, in hindsight, we should have just run for the hills. But my wiring is so much to always assume and think the best of people. I just kept thinking they've had a bad day. We've got crazy doctors. I'm going to explain to them, fight, please do something for our child. And it really wasn't until we decided to go to church on Sunday after my mom said the beautiful words, if there's a heartbeat, there's hope, which gave us this. We were never going to abort, but because we'd felt such despair, we were going to shut ourselves off from the world for a while, from work, from church. And when my mother said those beautiful, simple words, if there's a heartbeat, there's hope. And I always say this, everybody needs someone like my mom in their life. My mom wasn't some pro-life apologetics person. She wasn't, hey, you're going to be trained in case your daughter or somebody ever runs into trouble. My mom, out of a deep love and compassion, she saw my pain and Pete's pain. We weren't going to abort, pain over that doctors would tell us to end the life of our child. She saw the value of our child and so simply and beautiful said, if there's a heartbeat, there's hope. And all of a sudden in that moment, we were living like our child was dead. We were living and taking on everything those doctors said, which could have been true. It wasn't. But instead of going, wait a second, there's a child with a heartbeat that's still alive that we can fight for, and there's a hope. And we went to church that Sunday. The doctor said she was going to call our OBGYN and ask him, won't you at least do tests? She called us back Monday. She said, the doctor said the only test he will offer your family is an autopsy. And she said, before I called you guys, I called some doctors I know. They will take you guys. And immediately we got into the hands of doctors that saw, as wonderful Dr. Lyle and Dr. Berchalski said, 2 patients. He referred to Rachel as a little darling, whereas the other ones just referred to her as a diagnosis, not a person. And I was put on bed rest. And 3 months early, 1 pound, 2 ounces, Rachel was born. But I think that the overarching message is people are people. And no matter what their degrees are, no matter what, they come with their own set of biases and fears. And as parents, and especially as mothers, God has given us the awesome responsibility to ultimately recognize we are the ultimate advocates for our child. No doctor loves our child the way that we do. Nobody does. And especially how doctors are trained now, they are trained to so many of them, not pro-life doctors, but so many of them, to not see the value of that child. And I can't say enough, find a pro-life doctor before you even get pregnant. Find a pro-life gynecologist, pro-life OBGYN, and know that you can and you must tell people no in positions of authority that want to harm your child, no matter what scare tactics, no matter what they say, whether it's true or not. That child, I always say this, Rachel was valuable and worth fighting for, even if she died in the womb, even if she only lived 5 minutes, and even if everything they said that was wrong with her would have been wrong, because she's made in the image of God. We're not defined by our weaknesses. Thank God I'm not defined by my weaknesses. Nobody should be defined by their diagnosis, their struggles. So stand up to the medical field in kindness. Pete and I were never unkind. We're just like, good heavens, what are you saying?
Well, and that's what I was sitting here thinking about, Suzanne, is you are one of the kindest, most patient, right, loving. You just have this way about you, and yet there's a fierceness about you. And I mean, I think that's, again, sort of the similarity between you and I'm a peaceable person.
You're very kind.
Except I have that advocate gene that was obviously God created me with the same advocate gene you have. And we go through these experiences that sort of activate this about ourselves. But yeah, if somebody needs advocated for, nobody even has to ask me the question. I'm innately going to advocate. And, I think that takes a spirit of boldness, right? That comes from the Lord that says, yeah, no, I am not going to back down. I may be scared. I may not know everything, but I do know what's right. And I do know that I'm going to advocate for my child. I'm going to advocate for myself. No one knows everything, even medical professionals. Uh,
Right.
and so, yeah, you're a great example of a mama bear, right? A true advocate, not just for babies, but for women and families who deserve support, who deserve hope, who deserve quality medical care, not to have abortion being the only solution continuously thrown at them. So I want to pivot and ask you, what are some of the greatest resources that you recommend to families or for people who are listening who have maybe never been in these shoes, but they need to know if somebody is going through something, they need to be able to connect them. So what are the resources you recommend?
This is a moment I wish my Rachel was with me because she can roll off like 20 places off of her tongue. Um, a few places off the top of my head. First of all, A-Plog, which you and I, of course, are familiar with. I had never heard of it during the journey that Pete and I had with Rachel. But, that's a place to find pro-life OBGYNs. They are phenomenal. So that is a fantastic resource. Um, I would also say A-Plog being the big one because for me, my heart is everybody get into the hands of a pro-life doctor. Even if you're not a Christian, even if you're not even sure where you stand on the issue, you want to be in the hands of doctors that value both you and your child and will do right by. And I love the language that you used, advocate for. I even remember a conversation that we recently had, how there can be negative connotations with the word fight. And I've been trying to get that out of my vernacular because of how God used you in my life. But truly, advocate is the right word because that is such a loving, important, kind but bold. I love what you said, fierce mama bear thing to do. But if you start off by being in the care of a pro-life doctor, pro-life gynecologist, pro-life OBGYN, you are setting your baby and yourself and your husband and your family up for success. So that is so important. There are groups. Mary Kellett has a group, and I don't know why the group's name has left my head. Be Not Afraid is another great group. They do what Mary Kellett does, which is when parents are given some kind of a lethal uh, diagnosis, which again, these doctors use language to intimidate parents, to dehumanize the child. So they use all sorts of language that strips the child of the humanity to start planting seeds, knowingly or unknowingly, so the parent starts to sort of detach from the child. So places like Mary Kellett's ministry and Be Not Afraid are places when there is a diagnosis that will journey with the parents and help the parents, and they recognize the beauty and that child is made in the image of God, and they do counseling and all sorts of things, and they do it with the parents while the baby's in the womb and afterwards. And no matter what direction, maybe the diagnosis was true, maybe it wasn't true, maybe there are parts of it that were true, groups like that journey so beautifully with parents.
Yeah, and Be Not Afraid is definitely one of them I was going to highlight as well. And,
Yes.
I think you and I would both agree too that, connecting with a pregnancy center who can, provide support and make local referrals to other organizations. There is always someone in that
Yes.
community who can help. And I think, that is one of the saddest things. I mean, it's sad for lack of a better word, but when people are in crisis, we need to lower the temperature, right? Just like you were talking
Oh,
about, when
yes.
if you set the stage
Yes.
and you're already with a pro life OB, it's sort of like has this moderate temperature, right? It's not too hot. And you can start to withstand and be supported in whatever may happen. And when you're in crisis, yeah, we need somebody to help lower the temperature because you feel like you're on fire. you feel like every decision needs to be made right now, and then you have the pressure of the medical system saying, right, clock is ticking. And so connecting with a pregnancy center and other local organizations and being surrounded by these folks to support you in the short and the long term helps you to have better outcomes no matter what happens.
Melissa, we need to take what you just said and let that go viral because that's so beautifully said. That honestly is the heart of God, what you just said. And that applies to any situation. Maybe somebody just got a cancer diagnosis. Maybe somebody just got bad news about somebody they love. When we are really loving people well, which the pregnancy resource centers do, which most churches really do, I would even say find a church community if you don't have one, but to be with people that love so well that they sit and they listen. They don't bombard you with, you better this, don't do this, don't do that. They just sit and look into your eyes and listen to your heart and then ask if they can pray with you. And then start talking about never minimizing the gravity of the situation, validating that, but in a hope giving, help giving way that says, I am going to journey with you. I am here for you. There is hope. We don't know the outcome, but none of us know the outcome from day to day. But we're going to take this one day at a time. I'm going to get you surrounded by people that are safe and good listeners and hope givers and can give tangible help, whatever that might look like in the particular situation. And I love what you said because that's being Jesus. Jesus climbs in to our situations and he listens and he loves and he cares and he's a practical God and he has practical solutions too. And I love what you said because that's what each of us needs. And it goes back to what you initially said. What if there's a scared mom and she doesn't have support from her family or her husband? What if there's a scared woman and she has no idea where to turn? I thank God for your show because you are giving suggestions of places to go, people to call. People can always call me, they can call my daughter, call Be Not Afraid, call your local church, your local pregnancy resource center. There are I have found, and I know you have too, that the pro-life movement, even if you just Google pro-life, is full of some of the most kind, loving, go the extra mile people that love Jesus Christ and will journey with you for the long haul and in friendship forever. There are so many great people and resources that will give real hope and real help. Abortion is not either of those things.
Man, slap that one on a t-shirt. So, I mean, and you've just essentially answered a question that I would have had, which is, what would you say to someone who is staring this down right now, or a family member? And you've hit the nail on the head, right? You're not alone. There are people who want to help you. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to slow down, right? Nothing has to happen right now. And I think that's important even for men in your lives, because I can only imagine, how afraid and conflicted even your husband was, because he wants to protect you. He wants to protect his child. Um, and there's this, interesting dilemma where men are told that abortion is none of their business anyway. So that's a really interesting place for a man like your husband to be in.
Melissa, I love your heart for the Lord and for your fellow man. You are so amazing. You are addressing everything that needs to be said. And you and I know this. Men so often, even if they're not silenced by the culture, sometimes they're silenced by doctors. Sometimes they're silenced by themselves because they think, what do I do in this situation? I want to be strong. We know strong can be defined in so many ways, but the things that can be put on men, or how they can be silenced, or how they can accidentally silence themselves. I remember a dear friend who lost her son. He was about 12 years old. And she said one of the hardest things in that ongoing journey to this day is how her husband feels like he doesn't have any place to go. And I thank God for people like Sean Corcoran with Men for Life. And it doesn't even have to be a, hey, it can be a situation where the people are full on going to choose life, but the men still need somebody that they can safely fall apart with. It's usually it's acceptable for women to process however we process falling apart, whatever that might look like. But men, there's this pressure and there's no space so often for them. And thank God there are spaces now. People can contact people like Sean Corcoran and a whole host of other people that are showing, even if you were never going to choose abortion, there are men to talk to who care. You can cry with or not cry with. You can be angry with or not be angry. Feel how you feel and be understood and have a place to do that.
Amen and amen. As we wrap up, I just want to ask a kind of two specific questions. The first one would be, what is it that you now do based on your personal experiences? So how can people find what you're doing, and where are you geographically, so they can know if they're tuning in how they can be a part of that?
Thank you for asking that. I am in Marietta, Georgia with my wonderful husband. My daughter now lives in Woodstock, Georgia, and I'm involved in quite a few ways. So my mantra is, first of all, God wired me to have a lot of energy to give. So, I know the old saying goes, run in one lane, do it well. But for the purposes of what God has me on this planet to do, I'm kind of all over the place. So I can tell people, if you don't want to do this, you can do this. If you don't want to do this, you can do this. So I do a lot of lobbying at the Capitol for pro-life legislation. But as much as I care about the justice side of things, the mercy side, a dear friend of mine once said there's two sides to pro-life, mercy and justice. And when she said it was so powerful. I was like, that's the cross. That's the cross. Mercy and justice meet. I really have a heart for the mercy side because I am constantly burdened for women in crisis. Even though I was never going to abort, my heart aches for women that somehow abortion is on the table, either because it's being thrust upon them from a doctor, a boyfriend, a family member, or internally, or the culture. So one of my most favorite spaces is 40 Days for Life and Sidewalk Advocates for Life, two phenomenal organizations. They're sort of the perfect marriage of praying outside of the local abortion clinic and doing outreach. And I love this so much because there's no other space like this where women and men, I love that you brought up men, are going into an abortion clinic. It's not always for an abortion. Sometimes it might be STI testing or something like that. But 9 times out of 10 going in for an abortion, and you have a chance to be what my mother was to me, even though I was never going to abort. I love how my mother was the voice and picture of not, you better do this, you better do this, don't do that. No, my mother was, I love you, I'm here for you. If there's a heartbeat, there's hope. And I am trying to be my mother outside on that sidewalk all the time, even though we stand far away. I say, I know you don't know me, but I love you. I care. If you will give me and my amazing team, Rachel's amazing team, everybody in our team is extraordinary lovers of the Lord and people. You have nothing to lose. Come talk to us. We want to hear your heart. I want to hear your heart. I'd love to take you to lunch before you do something you can't undo. Can I just listen? And Melissa, the most common thing we hear is, you cared. We thought you were protesters. I don't have anybody in my life who cares. I'll just say this quickly. One day, Rachel and I were outside. We're waiting for a woman to come over. She still went into the abortion clinic, but she came over afterwards and talking to us. And she was going to yell at us. We would later find out because we became friends. And tears are dripping on our resource materials. And she says, what are these? And I'm telling her, we have places where you can go for hope and help. And we'd love to take you to lunch. And she said, where were you 2 weeks ago when I came? She said, the only reason I'm back today is to make sure it was a complete abortion. I just moved here. I had no job, no family, no friends, nothing. And I didn't want to abort. Most people don't want to abort. Most people abort because it's either a doctor, a family member, a boyfriend, or their own internal voice. So terrified. And they just need somebody to say, this is not the answer. There's hope. Try me and see if I mean what I say. And there's help.
Ooh, That is such a good place to end on, right? Try me. Try me. Um, and that's what we want people to do. They have a preconceived notion likely about what you do or don't know and why you're out on that sidewalk. So, ooh, yeah, try me in every good way. Man, you know how I feel about you and your family. And
We love you.
well, so likewise, ditto. Where can people reach out to you, Suzanne? Because you've done a great job a couple of different times saying, man, if somebody needs to talk or they need a resource, they can reach out to me. So, how can people get in touch with you?
One way is by going to 40daysforlife.com backslash Marietta.
How do you spell Marietta?
M as in Mary, A, R as in rabbit, I, E, T, T. That's T as in Thomas, T as in Thomas, A. Also, honestly, I think the very best way, but my email is a mouthful. It's a Bible verse about being, I know, shocking, I know. I wouldn't have picked this when I did 20 years ago if I thought I was going to be using it as much as I am. It's a Bible verse about being a voice for the voiceless. It's Proverbs, like the book of the Bible, 31, the number, and then spell out 8, EIGHT, at AppleThomasThomas.net. And I check my email 20,000 times a day. That's honestly the best way to reach me. Honestly, I would give out my phone number, but
I will not let you do that. I will not let you do that. And we'll be sure to put that in the transcripts as well, so people can literally see your email address, which clearly you've been asked that question a few times. You did a great job of being able to spell it. Well, thank you again, my friend, for who you are and all that you do, not just in the pro-life movement, but in the world. I am grateful for your witness. I'm grateful for your boldness and, just grateful for you.
Oh, Melissa, I'm so grateful for you. From the moment I met you all those years ago at one of Abby Johnson's conferences, Rachel and I were like, we love her. She's going to be stuck with us. We're claiming it.
Well, and now the listening audience is stuck with both Suzanne and I. And, I hope that you like it that way, audience. I just want to thank you for tuning in for this episode of Life Beyond Abortion with Suzanne Guy, where we had the great opportunity to really dismantle the lies about abortion being medically necessary when you're facing what looks to be a diagnosis that is incompatible with life. I hope that you found our discussion to be both enlightening and something helpful as you move forward, and a place that you can turn to and pass along to others. Thanks again for tuning in for this episode of Life Beyond Abortion.
Life Beyond Abortion is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions on the show are those of the host and her guest, and not necessarily those of the Herzog Foundation. You can find out more about Melissa's work at melissaohden.com or by following her on Instagram at melissaohden. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode of Life Beyond Abortion.